In honor of Auburn Week for Arkansas football, let's take a look back at our favorite memories against the Tigers on the hardwood for basketball and the baseball diamond on today's episode of Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, a fun and unique Friday edition where I, Curtis Wilkerson, and my partner in crime, Andrew Ellis, join forces for a Pod at the Palace bombastic podcast mashup. We're going to have a little bit of fun talking Auburn, Arkansas. Obviously, the Razorbacks are headed to the Plains to take on the Tigers in football Saturday afternoon. So we're just going to go back and dive into this entire rivalry across all sports. Andrew, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's Friday before the Auburn game. I'm buzzing. Wish we were up in the Plains, but it is what it is. We'll just have to watch and see how it plays out. But I'm looking forward to just seeing what tomorrow's game is like. Frankly, it's like the biggest game with the biggest stakes that literally no one is talking about. And so, maybe people will start talking about it afterwards. We'll see.
Yeah, no kidding. Rumor has it we're going to be better off watching this thing on a big screen television than in the press box at Jordan-Hare Stadium. That's like weirdly catty cornered and all out in left field somewhere. So we'll consider that a victory for this one. Let's talk a little bit. Let's jog memory lane. I mean, because we've been talking about Arkansas and Auburn football all week, and I feel like they didn't want to hear it for parts of the week, and now probably they're tired of hearing about it. Let's talk about the other sports, man, because this is an interesting series between these two schools across the board in all the sports. Let's start with basketball. I was doing a little bit of research, just jogging memory lane, but then also going back and looking at some things. It is insane how many memories, milestones, big moments have happened between Arkansas and Auburn on a basketball court recently and dating back. Curious, what stands out to you? Like, what's your favorite all-time Arkansas-Auburn basketball memory?
I mean, I'm not going to break any news here. Mine's the same as everyone else's. It's when number one Auburn came to Fayetteville and Arkansas wins that game. They storm the court. That Auburn team that year was a lot of fun. I mean, you talking about Walker Kessler. You had the little point guard. I can't remember his name, but he really was he was running his mouth a lot. You had Jabari Smith, who was the number 2 overall pick, who has been a very underwhelming player for the Rockets. But that Auburn team was kind of, at that point in time, that was a really fun Auburn team. They kind of flamed out towards the end of the year, but that was a fun win. And I feel like it was kind of a shining moment of the Musselman era. And that whole season covering basketball at home, I want to say that was my first year officially covering Arkansas basketball. And so it was like, at that point in time, I was like, man, this is just how it's going to be forever. The Must Bus is going to roll on for 30 years and life is sweet. Little did I know that was really like it for the Musselman era, but I still look back on it very, very fondly.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I remember that. We covered that game together, and the little point guard that you forgot, and I don't blame you for that, it's Wendell Green.
Yeah.
Well, I'll remember what Devo,
Johnson, who always would shoot 32%.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that was just it was such a special moment, man. I mean, you had Devo Davis, with his little dunk, and call it whatever you want at the end over Wendell Green there. You mentioned Walker Kessler. Do you remember him getting the yips at the free throw line late in that game? Like, he just
vaguely, I do.
Man,
I also just remember him being like immovable near the rim. Like in college, when you can leave a big man there, I don't know how teams ever score on teams like that.
Yeah, it was just unreal. And Arkansas, he was able to find a way to get that one done. And it just, you just knew. There was one moment in the second half where we were kind of looking at each other going, this is special. Like, this is something that we're both going to remember for a long time. And I just remember late in regulation, and then they had to wait, obviously, for a little while longer. But the crowd just felt so heavy, and everybody's like creeping down towards the court, and like, it's going to go nuts. Had Arkansas lost that game, they probably would have stormed the court anyway. Like, people were ready to go, man. It was nuts. Must loses the shirt. The whole thing was just, it was just crazy, man.
I also remember the internet. I don't know if someone tripped on a cord or someone stepped on something, but the internet went like completely dead in Bud Walton Arena. Like, as soon as the buzzer sounded, I remember having to call Trey Biddy and be like, hey, I have no idea if my story published or if any of it saved or if like whatever. I was like, so like, I don't have internet, but just figure it out because like, I can't do anything right now. I'm
oh man. Yeah, it was crazy, and we couldn't like, obviously, they stormed the floor, so we couldn't get from press row to the media room, and we knew we had a little bit of time because they were down there celebrating on the floor with the fans and stuff, but we were like, "What are we gonna do?" We had to go up and go, like, back through the concourse and down the stairs and through the little museum and stuff to get to the, get to the media room for the press conference. That was crazy, man. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to go beyond that in terms of what stands out the most, like, the most fond memory. But dude, I was doing some digging around. Think about some of these things. First of all, the biggest shot of Nick Smith's career. I mean, he hit that baseline jumper game winner against Auburn in the SEC tournament. Now they blew a double-digit lead to Texas A&M the next night, so it was like, oh, whatever. I think the moment I realized, and you probably remember this, that 2021 team, that they were going to be the real deal. They had such a lame non-conference because it was like the COVID restricted crowds. They didn't play anybody at Bud. But they were undefeated. But then their first road game was at Auburn to open SEC play, and they scored like 99 points, hit a bunch of threes, beat them by double digits, and you're like, oh, these guys are good. Too bad Justin Smith rolled his ankle.
Yeah, and I remember that game a lot, and because I remember the same thing. It was kind of the moment where we all had high expectations for that basketball team that year, but that was really one of their biggest first tests of the year, and on the road, and to see them play that well was kind of justification for us. And we were like, okay, we're allowed to feel good about this. Like every now and then in Arkansas sports, I mean, we always have this narrative of like, oh, hogs go hog, like they're gonna fall flat on their face. That was a nice little moment where we were like, oh, okay. Like we're actually like we're okay here with this team. Little did we know they were about to go through a very weird stretch. But Curtis, you remember on the other side of that weird stretch they went through, they played that same Auburn team again at home.
Yep.
And this was a crazy one where I don't remember what the halftime score was. I believe Arkansas was down 8 or 9, if my memory serves me correctly. Or they were definitely down by close to double digits in the first half at one point. I don't know if maybe they closed into it at halftime, but they go on a crazy run in the second half. And that team, that was a huge win for that team. That was one of those games where Muss played the same lineup for like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I feel like it was also like the moment we kind of knew what J. Will was. Because, yes. At that point in time, he was a freshman who really was playing, but like not really playing a ton. And then I think at that point, it was like, okay, not only is this guy, he's only averaging 4 and 3, but he's irreplaceable. That was kind of a big moment for him. JD Note, I'm sure, had some good moments. JD Note had some awesome moments in the Auburn game that we referenced earlier, though when they were number 1. But yeah, I remember both of those Auburn games the year before being really fun.
Yeah, they were an absolute blast. And some of the things, man, it's just crazy that predate even the Musselman era. I'm going to run you through these and then we'll move on. We'll talk a little bit of baseball. But the first SEC game that Arkansas ever played in 92 was against Auburn, blew them out. Arkansas set the record for the most points scored in an SEC game in 1994 with 117 against Auburn. In fairness, Auburn, they hold the largest margin of victory over Arkansas in Bud Walton Arena. That happened last season. Moving on, the first ever court storming in Bud Walton Arena was in 99 against Auburn. Arkansas beat Auburn in the 2000 SEC tournament championship, their only SEC tournament title win. It's just crazy. I did not know that all of these things happened against Auburn. It's kind of nuts. And quite honestly, as we get ready to move on here, with John Calipari and Bruce Pearl at the helms, like I mean, both teams are expected to be at the top of the SEC now and in the future. I think this is only going to continue to heat up as a rivalry. It's going to be a good one, man.
Do you remember when Mason Jones scored like 45 on Auburn? And I believe it was in a loss.
Yeah, actually,
I want to say it was Isaiah Joe missed that game, and Mason
exactly
Jones
right.
just had the one-man show, and I think it went into overtime. But that was a really fun game that like not many people remember because it didn't result in a win. But I remember that being like a fun, and that team was like an interesting team, that first Musselman team. But Mason Jones was a treat to watch every night.
Man, yeah, unbelievable. Some good memories, and certainly more to come on the old hardwood. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. We're switching it over from the Palace edition to the bombastic edition. Talk a little bit of baseball with this Arkansas and Auburn series. And we were talking about it before we got on the show. I'm looking forward to turning over the floor to you as our baseball expert, the guru, the wizard, because I ain't got much when it comes to Arkansas and Auburn. The only thing I remember was the 1 year that I covered Arkansas baseball on the beat right before you started with me over at Hog Sports. And that was the year that Arkansas won every SEC series that they played, but they lost the opener at home against Auburn, won game 2, and then they got down 5-0 in game 3, rallied back, tied the game, sent it to extras. Christian Franklin had a walk-off single to get that series win. That's it. That's all I got, Arkansas and Auburn. So please carry away.
Well, I'm going to start by going into the not too distant past, this past season. If you remember, Dave Van Horn, you remember he has a few triplets. I'm sure you heard a little bit about that. But Arkansas and Auburn had a freaking chaotic game 2 in their series this past year. And Arkansas had one game, 1-0 on a Vahiva Aloy home run. I think that was it. And then Hagen Smith was Hagen Smith. But then that night, Dave Van Horn gets the call of like, hey, you know, your daughter's going into labor. Like, you got to get here. So he drives all day that, I believe it was actually a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. But so Dave Van Horn missed the game 2 of the series. And it turned out to be the most chaotic game that needed like 13 head coach decisions where Matt Hobbs was the acting head coach, had to like make all these insane calls, pinch hitters, defensive replacements. There was a bunch of pitching changes, which, you know, Matt Hobbs can handle. But it ends up Arkansas wins 6-5. Ryder Helfrich hit a mammoth home run to give Arkansas the lead late in the game. There was an umpire delay. There was a delay because the umpire got hit in the neck and like needed to recover, and so they had to replace the umpire. There was like a bunch of just weird stuff going on in this game. Looking back, I can't believe it didn't go into extra innings. In my mind, I remember it being an extra innings game, but I guess it was not. It ended up being Arkansas used 6 pitchers. Will McIntyre gets the save in this situation. Brady Tiger had like a little bit of a rough start, and so it was just kind of one of those Arkansas had to piece together on the road without their head coach. And I felt like it was one of the more enjoyable wins of last season. And I'm going to also go back to at Auburn 2019. Arkansas played a really weird game in Auburn that I believe went, I have the box score here. I believe it went 15 or 16 innings.
Wow.
Yeah, 15 innings. And Heston Kjerstad, if you guys remember that big donkey, hit a 3-run home run in the top of the 15th to give Arkansas a 9-6 lead. But Arkansas played a doubleheader against Auburn and had blown a lead earlier that day. And this is 2019 Arkansas team that went to the World Series, was ranked in the top 10 all year. They played a doubleheader and blown a lead earlier in the day. And so we're playing a pretty big game against Auburn that night. And Connor Nolan was starting on the mound. He had a solid outing, but Arkansas ends up getting just crazy extra inning performances. Matt Cronin worked out of a couple of huge jams. Cole Ramage goes 4 2/3, all of which were in extra innings. That's pretty crazy. Kevin Kopps came in because Ramage eventually just ran out of gas. And Kevin Kopps, before he was Kevin Kopps, came in and got the win in that game, pitched an inning and a third. There were just so many huge moments in that game. Both teams, they ended up with like a combined 25 hits. Arkansas wins that one 9-6. So they've had some like weird. There was also a play where Auburn thought they scored the game-winning run and like celebrated and were going crazy. They reviewed it and said the guy was out at the plate. And that was in like the 7th or the 9th or 10th inning. And there was like 4 more innings on top of it. So it was just one of those back and forth chaotic games. Shout out to Stu Hall because he's really good at keeping like a database. He's the war machine of baseball who has all these. So if you're ever bored and have like 15 minutes to kill, Stu Hall, go to the 2019 Auburn game is one of the most chaotic baseball games of the last decade. And I also got a shout out friend of the program, Will McIntyre, because in 2022, Arkansas and Auburn met in an elimination game in the College World Series, which was a big moment for Arkansas. Will McIntyre puts together the game of his life, goes 7 innings, 3 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, ties Isaiah Campbell with 9 strikeouts in TD Ameritrade. So I believe that is the program record for Arkansas. He and Isaiah Campbell, most strikeouts in a College World Series game. Austin Ledbetter threw a scoreless inning in this game. Just wanted to throw that out there. It ended up being 11-1. And so it's, a pretty smooth day at the office for Arkansas. But anytime you win a big game like that in the College World Series elimination game, Peyton Stovall also had 5 hits, which I believe is a program record for the College World Series as well. So a lot of notable things going on. And so, yeah, Arkansas and Auburn, they're on slightly different levels as programs. Like, I feel like football, Auburn is clearly like a better, historically good program, has the edge over Arkansas. But I feel like in basketball and baseball, Arkansas is able to look down on Auburn just a little bit, not too far down. You don't get to look down at like the bottom of the barrel, but you get to look just a little bit further down. And there's Auburn. And so I think Arkansas fans kind of enjoy this rivalry with Auburn, where you kind of get to be the bigger brother in these other sports a little bit. And so, yeah, it's kind of weird that baseball, it's not like Auburn's this super historic baseball program, but of the last 5-6 years, Arkansas's had a lot of really cool, interesting battles with Auburn, and their coach, Butch Thompson's done a pretty good job at keeping them pretty relevant. They're really, even that year that you referenced, 2021, they were very competitive, even though they missed the NCAA tournament. And so, yeah, in basketball and baseball, Auburn's kind of evolved into one of these like weird, I don't know if anybody would be like, hey, this is our favorite rival, but there's just been a lot of fun matchups between the two teams.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we're going to talk about where Auburn ranks among the Razorback rivals in football as well as basketball and baseball, and maybe just big picture in terms of the teams Arkansas faces in the SEC. But first, a quick break to talk to our partners. I'll tell you what, folks, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel on this channel. It's America's #1 sports book. We got something a little bit different for you right now, but you got to act quick. It's now through September 22nd, so you just got a couple days, but all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel this thing anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sports book. All right, back here for the final segment of the Lockdown Razorbacks podcast, a special little mashup between the Pod at the Palace Bombastic Edition. Curtis Wilkerson and Andrew Ellis here with you. Let's talk about where Auburn fits on the rivalry scale with Arkansas. Let's go sports specific first. You just kind of talked about it from a baseball standpoint. I guess if we were to rank them in order of sport, like the least amount of a rival would probably be baseball. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, probably, just because like all of the things I just referenced are in the last 5 years.
Right.
And so it's like there's not like a ton of historic background. And Auburn, frankly, is not one of the more storied baseball programs. So I don't think it's one that Arkansas fans like look to and they're like, oh, this is a big one for us. Like they happen to be a team in the conference in baseball.
Yeah, exactly. Basketball, it's interesting. And this is it's a little bit of a challenge because you've had this coaching change. Like John Calipari coming over, it changes the dynamic a little bit. With Eric Musselman, like for example, him and Nate Oates, like if you said, okay, who's Arkansas's biggest rival in basketball? For the longest, I would have said, listen, it's Alabama, because those two dudes absolutely hate each other. Well, it's still going to be a rivalry because Arkansas is going to be really good and Alabama is going to continue to be good. But it changes a little bit. With Auburn, I would probably say, Kentucky's going to be your #1 rival in basketball. It's just the way it is now because of the Calipari factor. I think Texas is quickly going to be up there. I would put Auburn in that next tier. So maybe top 5-ish, but between them and Alabama, I wonder if the Ole Miss thing is going to heat up with the Chris Beard angle now. But I would like tier 1A or that second tier. I think that's probably where I would put Auburn as a basketball rival. What say you?
Yeah, again, like not in that top 3-4, but I do think like right after that, they start heating up, especially when you talk about the recent history, which definitely matters. And honestly, Curtis, like that's what shapes these rivalries. Moments like this that we can all point back to and be like, oh, I remember where I was when this happened. And these fan bases remember that kind of stuff. Like they remember Wendell Green saying all that he said. What was that backup point guard that they had?
Zeb Jasper.
Yeah, Jasper.
And he was the one that was really
crazy too.
Yeah.
And then they ended up, he didn't get to live up to his word there, but Yeah, no, it's I think that's what's cool about this. We kind of get to see these things evolve over time, and the context just matters. Like if you have a coach that goes there that spices it up, it is what it is. So I think they're probably not in that top group of like Kentucky and Bama, but I do think maybe 4 or 5 range.
Yeah, I think it's about where I'm at with it. Let's go to football real quick. This gets interesting. Where would you put Auburn in terms of football rivals for the Razorbacks?
See, now there's a couple that like are not basketball rivals of Arkansas that are like definitively over Auburn, but like LSU is definitively more of a football rival than Auburn, right? Like I think, and then A&M I would say is definitively more of a football rival than Auburn. Texas is of course, just like a rival in general. Outside of the, I'd say those top 3 right there. I mean, you can maybe throw in another. I'm trying to think who else am I leaving off?
But yeah, like be a rival. It's just such a good series.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, Bama. I think Arkansas is more of a rival with Auburn than Bama.
Yeah,
and then like so Mississippi State. I don't know how I feel about it. Like,
and yes,
we're leaving as a hostile rivalry.
We're leaving Missouri out on purpose. Okay. So
no, I knew there was like another team that I was like forgetting to mention. Honestly, dude, I mean, like, I think Auburn and Missouri are in the same kind of echelon in terms of football rivals. Missouri, you could argue, has the edge just because of the kind of recent history and the 2 coaches that were hired the same offseason that hate each other. But yeah, I think Auburn's kind of in the same top 5 range, but not in that top group. Like same kind of range. It's just different teams involved.
Yeah, I agree.
Kentucky's the higher rival in basketball, but obviously in football, like, it means nothing. So like I don't think other than Missouri, there's no like. I mean, I know there's no such thing as an Eastern Division, but there's no other East team in football that like you have that rival. Even Oklahoma, Yeah,
I would agree. Yeah, and that's true. So in terms of big picture, just SEC opponents, because there are a lot of fans out there who are just like, hey, I hate LSU. I don't care what sport it is. I don't like them. They're a rival. I want to beat them. I kind of feel the same way about Auburn as I do, basketball and football, where not the biggest rival, like they're not at the top of the food chain there, but they're up on the totem pole. Yeah, probably that second tier.
Here's what I've determined, Curtis. Auburn is Arkansas's 5th best rival.
There we go. That's what we're going to call it.
Across the board, there's different teams that some are higher, some are lower in different sports. Auburn is just like the 5th most hostile rivalry that Arkansas's got going on.
Yep. Yeah. It's always fun. It can be a little bit spicy. And given the context of the teams on a given year, it can be a real banger. So
are we counting the refs as Auburn as well, by the way? Like do like the refs count on the Auburn side? Cause it's like my hatred of referees kind of goes hand in hand with the hate, you know what I mean? So it's like, I kind of view those 2 entities as one and the same.
Absolutely. I mean, they wear the same uniform as far as I can tell. So yeah, I mean, 100%. And we'll be talking about that again this time tomorrow after this football game on Saturday, I do imagine.
Yeah, I was literally talking to a buddy yesterday about that Bo Nix fumble play. Where he's like, didn't y'all get screwed at Auburn that one time? And I'm like, yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes.
That did happen. You're right. Oh, man. All right. Well, this has been fun. I think it's going to wrap us up, but maybe be on the lookout for these on Fridays moving forward as Arkansas football gets into SEC play. We'll kind of dive into to what it looks like for the other sports and talk about where these teams rank among the rivals for the Razorbacks. But it's been a blast. We're going to get out of here. So for Andrew Ellis, it's been Curtis Wilkerson with Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Everybody have a good Friday. Enjoy the game tomorrow, and we will see you next week.